Hey guys, BuildZoid here with another PCB breakdown video. Today we're taking a look at the R9 Nano, and as you can tell, the PCB is very small. This is also the first GPU to feature HBM. Well, one of the first. There's the Fury X, the Fury, but they're all using the same chip, so I call them all the first. And yeah, so let's take a look at the first the core to actually talk a little bit about the HBM because I find that interesting because the HBM is the main reason why the PCB is this freaking small. So here we have the core. That's the big black square right in the middle, unsurprisingly enough. And then we have the HBM right here. That's one stack of HBM. That's 1 gig of HBM with a 1024-bit bus. Then there's another one right here. And then there's two more down here and here. And each of those has a 1024-bit bus, and each of them is 1 gig of, capacity. So that makes the 4096-bit bus of the Fiji cards function. And it also makes it possible to basically occupy the PCB with nothing other than VRMs and a BIOS chip and the absolute bare minimums for making a graphics card tick. It also really simplifies the PCBs down because a huge part of PCB complexity is usually routing all the traces for the memory chips. Like you can build a decent VRM with like 2 layers of PCB or 3 layers, but to route, say, something like a 390X's memory system, which is 512 bits, so that's at least 512 traces through the PCB that need to reach those memory chips is really hard. So the PCBs, thanks to HBM, are actually a lot like they're significantly simplified compared to normal GDDR5 or GDDR5X graphics cards because all of the really complicated memory traces are contained in the interposer, which is right here. Well, you can see bits of it right there. And this lighter part right here, which I just covered up, that's actually 65 nanometer features that you're looking at right there. So that stuff is really fragile. You absolutely do not want to scratch it or touch it or blow on it or even look at it the wrong way. Because if you put any kind of damage on that, it will break your graphics card, and the extent to which it will break your graphics card varies. If you just like damage a few traces from one of the HBM stacks, you might just be stuck with artifacts for all eternity. If you damage it significantly enough, the card just straight up won't work because you would have just destroyed its, memory connections and other connections that connected to the PCB and stuff. So yeah, be very careful when like cleaning thermal paste off of any Fiji graphics card. Be super gentle. Absolutely do not use anything made of metal to clean the card. I went with a toothbrush and I was still like basically just making sure that like once I saw the interposer because my cards were flooded with thermal paste, there was thermal paste freaking everywhere. So basically I didn't really push on the thermal paste with the toothbrush. I just sort of like had it grab it and pulled it off. And basically just flooded the card with alcohol to dissolve it and then used some tissue paper to clean it up. And after I was done with that, I very gently dripped Plastidip onto the interposer areas so that the interposer was protected from me being an idiot later. Uh, in the future. If I ever take these cards apart again, then there's Plastidip protecting the interposer from my, you know, gorilla hands. They're not really that clumsy. I'm exaggerating. Um, so yeah, really be careful with these cards and the interposer because you mess that up, it's done, and you aren't getting an RMA for this. So because that can be checked that you damage the interposer. On Sapphire cards, there's actually a plastic protector on the interposer, so, Sapphire cards, yay, Sapphire thought of doing that, so that's why they're one of my favorite GPU manufacturers. So let's keep going here with the analysis and look at the actual PCB. So Fiji cards feature 4 voltages, not 3, not 2, 4. Um, there's the 0.95 rail, which is basically a reference voltage for some display systems in the card, and you really don't have to worry about it. It's only concerning for LN2 overclockers and people pushing like really high voltage because it elevates black screen issues and it also makes the cards cold bug later. So yeah, I'm not going to discuss it here because you basically shouldn't do that to a Nano at all. And the other problem is I don't actually know how you would mod it on this card. I just sort of know where it's located. I don't have the card, so yeah, obvious limitations apply. I'm not going to know a lot of things about this PCB right here, except what I can read off data sheets. So your 0.95 rail VRMs are located over here. Well, somewhere in this area. I don't know where exactly. I'd need to have the card and check with a multimeter to find it, but it's somewhere over there. And really, that's all you need to know. Then we have one VRM here. This is a single phase, and it could be either the auxiliary voltage or HBM. And then we have another VRM over here, which again could be auxiliary or HBM. And I'm saying or HBM for either of them because they're both the same power output. They HBM and the auxiliary rail don't require a lot of power, and so either of them would be plenty of power to feed them. The problem is I don't have the card, and they look identical, so I can't tell which one does what. So if you have a Nano, you just need to measure the voltage off of basically, I think this capacitor should be hooked to the output of this inductor, and this one should be also hooked to the output of this inductor. So basically, if you just want to check which one's which, measure the voltage across one of these capacitors, or if there's capacitors on the back of the card, which I'm sure there are, you can measure the voltage across that, and if it's 1.35 volts, it's HBM. If it's 1.05 or something like that, then it's auxiliary. Um, Auxiliary really doesn't matter. It's not useful in the slightest, and HBM is actually super useful. Oh wait, HBM is 1.3, not 1.35. Yeah, so HBM is 1.3, not 1.35. But HBM voltage is super useful for overclocking HBM. Like a small boost in HBM voltage or adding capacitors to the HBM VRMs, for me on the Fury X made a huge difference. I went from like 570 megahertz to 600 stable, and 600 megahertz gives a huge performance boost. Like it's like plus 5% over 570. So yeah, it's a big deal to get like good clean voltage for the HBM and also raise the voltage. If you want to raise the voltage, you can actually do that with a BIOS. You don't need to do any physical mods, though I'll detail how to do the physical mods for HBM anyway. If you want to do capacitors, just figure out which VRM is HBM by measuring the voltages on the back of the card when the card is running, and then add capacitors there. Yeah, I'm actually gonna do a video about capacitor modding sometime eventually. Not right now. I have some plans for it, but I still need to like perfect it because I've only recently started doing it. So yeah. So that's the HBM and auxiliary, and finally let's look at the V-core, which is located right here. All of the capacitors for the V-core voltage, like the bulk capacitors, are on the back of the PCB because this VRM is shoved right onto the core. AMD has like really surpassed themselves with making a card compact here because like there's no space here for capacitors on this side of the PCB even. So the core voltage here is a 4-phase, and it's using the same exact MOSFETs as you would find on a Fury X or a 290X or a few other cards. So low side is the 6894, so 160 amps at, oh wait, yeah, 160 amps at 25 degrees, and 72 amps, wait, no, 75 amps at 125 degrees. Absolutely beast low side. There is no way you're running out of power on the low side of this VRM again because this is a Nano, and yeah. Even if you really want to push this card, like if you cool this VRM down enough, it will handle anything you try to throw at it. So yeah, the low side is absolutely great. The problem here with this card is the high side is still the 6811. And since there's only 4 phases, the 6811s aren't sharing the load as much as they are on a 290X or a Fury X. And the 290X already has a problem with the high side burning out if you don't cool it well enough. On the Nano, that gets exaggerated because there's one phase less than the 290X and 2 phases less than a Fury X. So if you really, really push a Nano, by really, really push, I mean way beyond what your ATX connector, like what your 8-pin can actually handle, way beyond what the 8-pin can handle, you are very, very likely to blow up the VRM on this thing. Just the high side will burn out for sure because it just can't deal with it. Um, at 100 degrees, you can expect this VRM to handle uh, 70 amps pulsing through the high side. So if you want to use the low side's 280 amp capacity, you need to keep the VRM below 100 degrees because the high side can't keep up with the low side really, really badly. So yeah, this VRM really needs a lot of cooling. If you want to push 200 amps, so that would be like 240 watts at 1.2 volts, then yeah, you need to already start doing quite a bit of cooling because that high side only does 32 amps at 125 degrees, and it's not gonna deal with it very well when you push a lot of current through it. So do keep that in mind. You could easily like cool a Nano and feed it like 300 watts, but then the 8-pin is already a problem. And the Fiji chips will happily go up to 400 or 500 watts power draw when you feed them enough voltage, and the Nano will explode above 350. As far as I'm concerned, if you push it above 350, the high side of this VRM will most likely melt because it just won't deal with it any longer. So yeah, now let's actually get to the volt modding and removing power protections so that you can burn out your VRM that much faster. The VRM, the HBM, and the core voltage both should be controlled by this here, which is the 3564 from International Rectifier. It's a 4+1 um, voltage controller, and it does dynamic phase balancing and all kinds of fancy features for high power efficiency, low voltage noise, and it's a very, very smart voltage controller. So let's take a look at it. It also has per phase power sensing, and overall it's just a nightmare to work with when modding. But it's a very, very smart voltage controller, so there's nothing really to complain about here. Well, you can complain about power modding being hard, but other than that, as far as software voltage controls go, this thing is great when you have full control over it. Now, if you want to if you want to hard mod your power controls, then you are going to be looking at this pin, this pin, this pin, and this pin. Those are all core voltage power, and those control the 4-phase VRM that do, core voltage. So those are all of your power sensing for that. If you want to mod them, then you basically just trace them out to their resistor, which I think is this one, this one, this one, and this one. And I say think because I don't have the card. I can't check that they actually trace out to those resistors. But if they do trace out to those resistors, then basically replacing those resistors with a higher value resistor will get you more power allowance. I'm currently working out an easier way to do power mods on the IR35 series controllers, but for now, this is the only way you can do it. You have to replace the SMD resistors, which is a freaking pain. So yeah. So that's that for core voltage power. You can also take care of HBM with this pin, but I can't tell where this one traces out to. I think it's going to be this resistor, or because the other one should be on the return pin. So yeah, so this one, that's your HBM power, and you really shouldn't have to mod that. There's no reason to mod it because the HBM is so low power. So now let's look at voltages. Core voltage located right here. And let me just check that with the data sheet. It is number 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's your core voltage pin. It should trace out to either side of this capacitor, and either like one of them, either or, because one of them's obviously going to ground. It's a capacitor, and one of them is going to be hooked up to that pin, and that's there to sort of smooth out any noise the pin might pick up um, from just ambient magnetic fields. And yeah, that's there to, so you can solder from that to ground. You'll probably need like a 50 ohm or a 200 ohm really fine precision potentiometer to ground. It should also trace out to this resistor, and you have to manually trace this out because I don't have the card, so obviously I don't know where this pin leads to. If you have a problem actually reaching pins, I'm gonna have a trick for tracing out voltage controllers video sometime soon. I still need to get everything prepped for it. Um, and let's cover HBM voltage, which you can actually mod all voltages for this card with a BIOS mod. I haven't released a modded BIOS for this card because I don't have it, and I don't trust myself to not blow people's cards up when I can't check against a card I already have. So to control HBM voltage, you're going to be working with this pin, and that seems to trace out somewhere into this area. So yeah, there's going to be something there that you can trace onto. It might also trace out to the opposite side of the board. So that's that. That's basically all you need to do hard mods on this card. The auxiliary rail doesn't really do anything, and I can't find a controller for it here. The 0.95 rail is mostly irrelevant. So, well, is actually completely irrelevant on the Nano. You don't want to LN to a Nano, and you really don't want to give it a lot of voltage either. So that's, yeah, that's all the mods covered. Well, all the voltage mods. One thing to consider is you do only have a single 8 pin here, and the 8 pin is rated at 150 watts, but in reality they should be able to push about 250. 250 watts, as AMD proved when they released the R9295X2, which uses two 8 pins and consumes 600 watts, or even, well, 600 to 500 watts, depending on what kind of workload you gave them. One last cool feature about the Nano PCB is, well, you got a BIOS switch right here. I'm starting to run out of colors. So you got a BIOS switch, and yeah, and that's really useful if you're flashing custom BIOSes, which you can do because there's, you can make your own custom high HBM voltage BIOS, custom you can basically things you can customize for with the BIOS for this card is you can change the power limit, you can change the HBM voltages, and you can change core voltage. Um, you're still going to run into the whole performance degradation with raised core voltage, even if you raise the power limit, but you shouldn't see any actual throttling any longer. I'm still investigating the whole V-core causes FPS drop thing, and I think I might have a solution, but the IR3567B, which has way more pins than the 3564 on this card, terrifies me, so I haven't, dug into it that much yet. Yeah, so that's that for this Fury Nano PCB analysis. Oh wait, one last thing about the single 8 pin. If you really, really, really need to push more than 250 watts into a Nano, or 300 watts, or, I think the card will still handle 300. If you really want to push more than 300, you're going to have to add an extra 6 pin, and you can do that by just buying like a 6 pin extension cable and just solder it onto the back of the 8 pin. Just hook it up to the 8 pins, and I'd like to do a guide about that, but I don't have a card that I would like to make that ugly yet. So yeah, and I was considering buying a Nano, but the RX 480 got announced, and so now I want to buy an RX 480. But for all we know, AMD won't cancel the Nano for a while because you can still get that thing in stores, and it's still it still offers more performance than the RX 480, and with the right tweaking, I think you might be able to get a Nano to outperform even overclocked Fury X's. So I still want to get one of these just to play with it, but as of right now, there's no way that's happening because I can't afford it, and this channel's not big enough for me to be able to walk up to AMD and be like, "Hey, yo, I want a Nano." So, that's that. There will be an RX 480 video on launch day. I decided not to do a speculation video because it doesn't make any sense. You know, there's nothing I can tell you right now that's going to be 100 it's not going to be 100% assured, and it's just way better for me to just wait until the card launches, and once it launches, do a proper PCB breakdown and cover everything properly instead of doing some half-assed video where it's basically me saying I think it's going to do this. If you enjoy watching people go saying, I think it's going to do this, well, there's a million other YouTube channels that have done that. So, yeah, you can go watch them. So, that's that. Yeah, and sorry for being out for a bit. Like, stuff happened this week. Um, Content will start coming out regularly again, and I will start streaming again soon enough. My GTX 590 is finally cleaned out, so I need to go, I want to give that thing a spin, and I might give the 570 a spin. I am all out of liquid nitrogen, so there's not going to be any liquid nitrogen streams for a while. And yeah, that's that. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. Like, share, subscribe, and do please consider donating to fund, you know, if there's some project you really want me to do, then just drop like $5 or whatever and say what you want me to do with them. You know, if enough people drop $5, then eventually something will get done. Otherwise, it's just going to be, well, relying off on me, which actually, incidentally, I got good news. I'm finally managed to find somebody to sell my 5960X, so I will have some spending money sometime soon for the 480 and some other things, but I'm not quite sure decided what else I'm going to be buying yet. So yeah, I need to get another current clamp because my one's broken right now, which is really annoying. So yeah, that's that for this video, and goodbye.